But I've always found that there's only two outcomes: success, or you've exhausted every possible option and it didn't work. And either one of those is okay. It's okay to fail, but not to quit.
This is my conversation with serial entrepreneur, rapper, coach, and best-selling author Jesse Itzler. Jesse's one of the most infectiously positive and entrepreneurial people I've ever met. I first discovered him at a Tony Robbins event where he was on stage sharing his entrepreneurial war stories, how in his 20s he founded a private jet company that he eventually sold to Warren Buffett, even though he knew nothing about the jet industry, how he met David Goggins and eventually wrote a best-selling book about him, became part owner of an NBA franchise, and how he's helped countless business owners build successful companies through all kinds of quirky ideas. And I realized quickly these stories were very different from the ones you'd get from professors in school or in the ranks of the corporate world. They were adventures from a real human being. They didn't follow the usual script of learn the lessons first and then apply them. They were about dreaming big, diving in, learning as you go, and grinding relentlessly when, not if, you get knocked down. There's also always this very high energy, fun vibe to everything Jesse does. A positivity that's contagious, but also realistic, and an antidote for all the negativity we have in the world today. Jesse's life philosophy teaches us the value of listening to our hearts, not negotiating with the big goals that really excite us, and building not just a career resume, but what he calls a life resume. You see it in the way he prioritizes his wife and kids, the way he shows up for his friends, and in the sheer audacity of his goals. I hope you all enjoy learning from this awesome human being as much as I did. This is Jesse Itzler. You started as a rap artist in the early 90s and had some early hits, including the pretty epic Shake It Like a White Girl, under the artist name Jesse James. You wrote a popular jingle for the Knicks, Go New York Go, which reached number one on New York radio. I think they're still using it at the Knicks, right? At MSG?
Yeah, they are.
Amazing.
They are.
Amazing. You then founded Marquis Jet, which became one of the largest private jet companies in the world, which you eventually sold to Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway in 2009. You then married Sarah Blakely, the founder of Spanx, a game-changing billion-dollar brand in women's fashion. In 2015, you were part of a group that bought the NBA's Atlanta Hawks, which we just talked about, the basketball stuff, love it. And you then became a New York Times best-selling author when you published Living with a Seal, the story of you living and training with David Goggins for 30 days, and then later Living with the Monks, more of a spiritual journey, which was also awesome and funny and super insightful. Today, you offer various programs and challenges, including Build Your Life Resume and various running and endurance challenges. I mean, your life and career, when I look at it, it seems like a wild ride in an amusement park, more than a kind of a linear journey that people typically have, school, start a job, and then maybe start a business. There's always this very upbeat, fun energy to like everything you do. But when we scratch the surface even just a little bit, you see a completely different side also. You see kind of a savage, super consistent work ethic and discipline. And usually we don't see those qualities in the same person. Did you always have this kind of duality in you? Or how did it take shape in you as you sort of grew and started engaging in your life journey?
Yeah, I would just put an asterisk next to the work ethic thing. I mean, I have a good work ethic, but I wouldn't say my work ethic is better than anyone else's, or I'm not working 21-hour days. I'm not the person that's I have 4 kids, and I try to go to everything. But I do, when I have a goal, I do really hone in on that goal. So I get incredibly out of balance when I have a big race or a big business thing, whatever the goal is. But I always bounce back to normal. So I wouldn't say when I think of myself, Fred, I don't think of myself as someone that's, this guy, Kobe's always in the gym. I'm not that guy. But I get really, when I have a goal, I sink my teeth into it, and then I'll, make sure I carve out the time, and I'll obsess on it until I get it done.
Interesting.
So I'll go all the way until it gets done. Until see it to fruition, but I'm not, you know, I hear that all the time, and I've never lived my life like that. You know, like my Saturdays, I shut the phone off when I come home. I actually take 3 hours a day for myself. So I don't have that, I'm not a 23-hour a day grind guy. I really don't even always necessarily believe that. Everyone's different, but that's me. So anyway, that's for starters.
Right. So you're really goal driven. Like it's the goal that excites you. It's not like a general characteristic that you have to like always be like waking up, grind, work, like be super organized. It's really the goal itself that gives you the energy that you then use to sort of get after it like obsessively.
And I go in and out of it. So I'll go through weeks where I don't have that same energy or drive. You know, like right now I like signing. I'm an endurance athlete, and I just completed a really big race called Ultraman, which is a 6.2 mile open water swim, 6.4 mile open water swim, 261 mile bike ride, and a 52.4 mile run. And since that is ended, I haven't even really ran or anything. I don't have anything else on my calendar. So I'm in between that right now. I went through like an intense period, training, whatever. And now I'm back to like, not in that mode. So I go in and out of it. Yeah. I love the newness. I love challenges.
Do you approach that in between time as like recovery time? Or is it just like you're waiting for the next goal to come? Because you hear that a lot of peak performers really stress the importance of recovery, like they see it more as waves than as like just kind of like always grind.
It's less recovery for me and more. I like big goals, like I have big, and they take a lot out of me. So, and I'm not talking about physical. It's even just the emotional of it. I'm still processing the whole race, what I got out of it, how did I do it, the good, the bad. And I'm looking for something that will get me. My goals are based around enthusiasm. I was very enthusiastic about whether or not seeing if I could complete this or not. And until I find something, business or personal, that sparks that enthusiasm, especially now I'm in my 50s, I don't do it. So I'm not just going to have a goal to have a goal, but if I'm always looking for something that I'll be very enthusiastic about. Fred, when you get a 980 on your SATs, you got to over-index in enthusiasm.
I love it. That dopamine just kind of keeps driving you forward and towards that goal. Right. And I guess you also have to be super authentic with yourself and in touch with yourself and your own emotions to kind of know yourself. If you pick the wrong goal, right, you're not going to be able to generate enough energy to actually get after it.
And sometimes the goal chooses you. My parents are elderly now. My dad passed away recently. And sometimes you get in a position where, wow, this wasn't what I expected to be putting my energy into. You get put in a position where the goal chooses you. People think we always choose our goal, but very often something happens in life. You get dealt something you aren't expecting. Maybe your kids have a glitch. All of our kids have some kind of glitch. You have to deal with it. So that happens periodically too, and that takes a lot of energy. I don't have unlimited energy. So I have to choose the elective style goals based on enthusiasm.
That's great. So when I look at the different goals that you've picked in your life, right, you've got this really strong artistic side, right? You started as a rapper. I mean, you've done a lot of stuff in the music industry, right? I've seen your career. I mean, you weren't just dabbling in it, right? You actually went in and you had a whole sort of artistic career dealing with labels and so forth. And then for me, like the most striking transition when I look at all the different goals that you've picked in your life is the one where you go from being essentially an artist. And I've worked with a lot of artists, a lot of recording artists. I kind of know the profile. You go from that to not just having a business idea, not just founding the private jet company, but actually building a private jet company that turned out to be, one of the largest in the world that you ever eventually sold to Berkshire Hathaway. We know how, demanding they are on their metrics and the management and the quality of the business. I mean, so I see this artistic side, and then I also see this really like building an amazing business as well. How did this transition come about in your life? How did you choose to go from a more, artistically oriented goal to a really hardcore business goal and actually seeing it through?
Well, like most things in my life, it wasn't planned. I was a guest on a private airplane, and I saw an opportunity. My partner and I saw an opportunity in that space. And we had no aviation experience. We had no airplanes. We didn't have really much money or much access at that time. But we had an idea. And everybody's just one idea away from changing their life. We just sometimes we don't see it, or we don't think about it, or we think it's impossible. And we had this one idea. And once we had the idea, it was very overwhelming. We're going to start this private jet company so we can fly privately. I was 28 years old. And if they would have said to me in the beginning, Fred, well, you have to get FAA approval. They did say this. You have to get FAA approval, Department of Transportation approval. You have to build a sales team. You're going to have to raise money. I was a kiddie pool attendant 4 years before that. What are you talking about? What was the first thing that you said we have to do? We have to get Department of Transportation approval. Well, there's got to be a lawyer that specializes in that. Let's get that lawyer. And once we got that, we moved on to the next thing. So, we took this gigantic obstacle or journey that we had, which would be almost too intimidating for most people. Yeah. And we started doing it just like doing Ultraman, I didn't know how to swim 6 months ago, really. You start to attack it bit by bit, chopping off the most important things. And for us, a lot of that was hiring, outsourcing. I realized I didn't have the skill set, nor did I have the time to learn how to do it. I call a plumber because it will take me too long to find an electrician because I'll never be able to YouTube it and figure it out. But I just call somebody. So it was the same thing. A lot of my career has been I know what I'm good at. I'm good at sales. I have good vision. I'm a good idea guy. I'm good at marketing. I'm good at enthusiasm. I'm good at culture. And those are the lanes that I stayed in. And when we could afford to hire people for the other positions, we did. And that's still the same today. I'm not a balance sheet guy. I'm not I'm not a lawyer. So I know my lane and I try to stay in my lane.
It's so amazing how, as you say, staying in your lane, it sounds like you're making yourself smaller. It sounds like you're restricting yourself. But in reality, that's exactly what's required to build something really big, right? Because you're not going to be able to excel at enough things. And there are people out there who do excel at those different lanes. So it's almost like in order to transcend your own limitations, you need to first accept what they are.
Yeah. And listen, I've seen people build amazing, that have the bandwidth to do that themselves. And my dad owned the plumbing supply house. I was never around business. I still am learning, I'm constantly learning, but I really rely on people that are experts to help me. And even when I had nothing, slowly but surely, it didn't happen at once. We would bring in people that could assist. And it's always been the same formula. Even today, I haven't bothered to learn a lot of the legal and the accounting side of things. Enough. But why? When I get hired, if I'm going to sell the company, I'm not doing it myself. I'm going to someone like you or someone that does transactions that can, really help guide me. And I'm willing to pay that fee for that expertise, as opposed to using my time, to try to learn it, but I'm never going to be as good as you at it, because I have other things going on.
Absolutely. No, it's really wise. And you often stress the value of diving in, not overthinking it, not basically leading with action, right? In the Monk book, you write, for example, experience is overrated because it just takes too long, right? If you waited until you had all of the credentials that some business academic would tell you need to start a private jet company, you would have never started a private jet company, right? So experience just takes too long. You dive in and you figure it out. Your survival instinct kind of kicks in, and then you kind of energize sort of everything you do. And obviously combined with that amazing ability to know what you're good at, to know what your limitations are, and then kind of build a team around that. So this is obviously a super powerful approach, without a doubt. It could also come with a little bit of danger and risk, right? Definitely more danger and risk than people who go with a more deliberate approach, or want to play things a little bit more safe, or more connected to sort of all the different downsides that can happen. How do you decide when to dive in and when not to dive in, right? You've got this big goal, are you aware of, do you apply that same sort of self-awareness of your role? Do you apply that also in the selection of the actual goals or the actual ventures you're going to get involved in?
Yeah, I mean, for starters, for many people, it's really intimidating to not have experience. Experience is important if you're a surgeon. But for what we're talking about, I just didn't have the time for most of the businesses to develop the skills. I mean, there would have been a million different businesses launched in the same space if I would have waited. And for a lot of people, not having experience can be incredibly intimidating, and it can be a deterrent. But for me, it was always a big gift because it guaranteed that I would do things differently than everybody else. It guaranteed that I could just trust, I would learn how to do it. It would give me a different perspective, a fresh lens than everybody else in the industry. Most people in most industries follow the playbook that's standard in that industry. And that's not where innovation and disruption comes from. Innovation comes from newness and being willing to do things, look different and operate different and treat your customers differently. And I'm constantly asking myself, how could I do this differently? What makes me stand out? Is this the right font? Is this every element of that? And not just for the sake of being different, but authentically different. So for me, that was the greatest gift because it meant Marquis Jet. We were going to do everything differently in every business that I've had. So that's the first thing. When I was younger in my 20s, I said yes to everything. 20s are a great time to network, say yes, get out there. You're building a foundation and you want to create luck. You want to put yourself in an environment where you can attract luck, who you meet, a possible sale, introductions. That doesn't happen staying home. So you have to say yes. As I've gotten older, I've realized the importance of saying no. And a lot of people don't want to say no because you don't want Fred's a jerk. I asked him for 15 minutes and he couldn't even give me 15 minutes of his time. Right. You want 15 minutes of your time? If you spend 15 minutes every day and just treat it like a throwaway, I'll give you 15 minutes. Because people always ask me, I was like, 15 minutes, that's like the standard. 15 minutes, there's something called the rule of 100. The rule of 100 is if you spend 100 hours in the course of a year, it's basically 15, 18 minutes a day. You'll be better than in any discipline that you choose to spend 15 minutes a day. You'll be better than 95% of the world's population in that discipline. It doesn't mean you'll be a jiu-jitsu master. It doesn't mean you'll be the best saxophone or violin player or chess player, but you'll be better than 95% of the world's population. If you spend 15 minutes a day reading a book and you're an average reader, you'll read about 18 to 20 books a year. Think about what you can learn. So you can't be casual with your little 15 minutes a day. In fact, you should be really deliberate and carve out 15 to 30 minutes a day. I'm going to answer your question in a second, but I don't know if the parents listen to this, but I remember before I even had kids, I was in my office at Marquis Jet. My friend came in. I asked him how the weekend went. He said, it was good. I said, what'd you do? He said, I went to my son's soccer game. I said, how'd you do? Just making conversation. How'd he do? He said he had 7 goals. I was like, 7 goals? How old is he? 7 goals? Are you kidding me? He said, he's like 6. I said, well, how did he get so good at soccer? He said, well, I spend 5 minutes a day with him. I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, it's just 5 minutes a day. All the other kids, they go to practice on Saturday. And then they do their own thing and then they practice on Saturday. But my kid is getting an extra 5 minutes, an extra 30 minutes a day, an extra 2 hours a month. And he goes, that's the difference.
Wow.
And I didn't even have kids. And I'm like, I never forgot that. And I started implementing the 5 minute a day rule with my kids when they were young. Now it's gone to like a 15, 20 minute rule a day. But that time is very valuable. It's important that you structure your day and you leave time for yourself to learn. Gandhi said it best. Live like you're going to live like you'll die tomorrow. Learn like you'll live forever. You have to keep growing and mastering your skill, whatever your skill is. Before I did Ultraman, all right, I've never even done a sanctioned Ironman in my life, and I jump into this like the granddaddy of all these races. I dove into it every day. I learned how to swim on YouTube. That's when you talk about in the beginning hard work. No, it's an obsession while you have your goal on your way to your goal, and then you go back to your regular life. And I told my family, I told my wife and kids, I'm going to be. Daddy's going on his own island for 3 months, man. I got to knock this thing out, and then I'll be back. So they knew because I didn't want them to resent me. I didn't want to resent them. I didn't want to feel guilty for if they took away what I love to do. Going back to your question about choosing things on experience versus lack of experience, Your 20s, you say yes to everything. And then as you get older, you start to realize the importance of no and how to say no, which I can talk about in a minute if you want. Mm-hmm. But the way that I grade things now as I get older, if you're not in your 50s, you can think about this as you get older, is aggravation versus reward. For me, I don't want high aggravation going into my 60s and 70s. In my 20s, I could handle high aggravation for high reward. It was that trade-off was worth it for me. That the aggravation was worth it because I had nothing. I wanted the reward. But now I want low aggravation, even if it's low reward, but for the highest reward. If it's high aggravation, someone say, hey, you want to co-found Google right now? No, you couldn't pay me $1 bazillion to start Google because I have 4 kids. I wouldn't I wouldn't trade that for that right now in my life, missing and working 20, I wouldn't do that. So it's aggravation versus reward. One thing I want to add, there's an art to saying no. And if you're like me, you don't like it because you want to be liked. So you don't want to say no to people because you're scared that they're not going to like you. But there's an art to saying, if you invite me, Fred, to go to dinner on Thursday night, this Thursday night, you're like, Jesse, we're all 5 guys, man. We're going out. We'd love for you to join. First of all, I'll say, Fred, I appreciate the invitation. I can't do it on Thursday. I don't need to explain why. Mm-hmm. I don't need to give you an explanation when I say no, why I can't go. I'm not on the defensive. You invited me and I can't go.
That's big. Yeah.
Now, you guys, the reason why I don't want to go is I'm going to sit home. I'm going to play a baseball catch with my son this Thursday. Now, you guys 5 guys are at the restaurant. I've already said no. And I do it myself. I don't outsource my no's usually. I do it myself. Let them know. I'll call up the restaurant. I'll be like, my friend Fred is there. I want to pick up the bill. I want to send dessert. I want to buy a round of drinks. I want you to write this note, please. Fred, thanks for the invite. I wish I was there with you guys. Love you guys, man. Dessert on me.
So you show like love and appreciation. You don't just say it. You also demonstrate it, and you're kind of part of the experience, right?
And I've used it as an opportunity. I'm the hero of the dinner. Yeah. I'm the hero of the dinner. Like, this guy's, look at this guy. He's not even here. He said this. He thought about us. I invited him 5 days ago.
Yeah, that's really
cool.
You
remember? Yeah. He's thinking, there's a way to turn a no into an amazing opportunity.
That's huge.
Think about all the no's, the time you're going to save, the 15 minutes you're going to save to master whatever it is you want to master. And think about how that's going to have, shockwaves throughout all those no's that you say. And I've become really good at that. And by the way, I do show up for my friends. I do show up. I don't say everything, but I can't say yes to everything.
Absolutely.
One more thing I want to say.
Yeah.
I'm warming up now. As you evolve, right? When I started Marquee, I didn't have kids. I didn't have a wife. I had time.
Dude.
I would eat dinner at 11 o'clock at night. I'd still carve out time for myself during the day. I'd still run races, but I could do whatever I wanted, in and out of the office, weird hours, all that. At 54, my life looks I eat dinner at 5:30 now. So your life system has to evolve as you evolve. You can't, and as I put more on my plate, running races that take, it's a 30-hour race, having kids and all this stuff, you have to say no.
Yeah.
You can't keep adding stuff without saying no to other things. So you have to get good at it.
I love how organic you are about these things. Like you don't have like a perfect theoretical answer that you then try to measure, like that you then try to sort of fit your life in. You have this very kind of like organic, responsive almost approach to like, okay, what does my life look like today, right? It's not the same as it was at 20, not the same as it was at 30. So you're trying to make it fit in a broader sort of life experience.
I don't want to steer anybody on theory. I can only talk from my life model, what I've experienced, what's worked for me and what hasn't. I can't talk about theory. So either some of the things that we'll talk about in the course of our conversation today will resonate, people will try it, or it won't. But I have to only share from my experiences. I'm a big believer in the more you experience, the more you can offer. I've lived on it with lived with a Navy SEAL. I lived on a monastery, been in the music business. I've written books. I've had businesses that work, businesses that fail. I've dealt with losing a parent. I have kids. I feel like I can talk about a lot of different things, but only things that I've done.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I think it resonates, because we feel that authenticity. Even in your writing style, it's very authentic. It's very direct. You're not trying to make it sound like something. You're not trying to make it sound like someone. It's very clear that it comes from the heart and it comes from your actual experience. So Living with the SEAL, that was a very, very, a lot of people read that book. A lot of people are into, the whole the David Goggins Stay Hard movement. We love it. Gives us the inspiration. Sometimes you need that little kick in the butt to wake up in the morning and go for that run. Living with him for 30 days. The question I have for you, does Goggins have a secret, friendly, soft side that we don't know about and don't see? Or is it really all like stay hard all the time?
Well, I haven't spoken to him in a while, so I don't know what he is like now. But when I met him in 2006. So I met him 16 years ago, and he was a part of my life more than just 30 days. I wrote about 30 days, but I've known him for a long time. And yeah, I mean, he has, I should say, as far as when I was rolling with them more, an intensity that I don't think he's ever going to lose.
Yeah.
You'd have to ask him. But what I loved about Goggins is they always say surround yourself with like-minded people. But I always found why? They do. They think I want to surround myself with people that aren't like me so I can learn about them. I love meeting people that are really great at what they do in fields that I'm interested in, like spirituality, the monks, mindset, Goggins, business. I live with my wife is an incredible entrepreneur, health and wellness. So I seek out these people that are great at things that I'm interested in, and Goggins was one of them.
Amazing. A key lesson that really resonated with me, and it goes back to what you said about having these huge goals and then chunking it down, like starting with the, you had to get the approval, and then it's like, all right, now we got to build a team, and now we've got to do all of these things that right, we've got to find the right pieces around us. One thing you wrote about your experience with the SEAL is that your perspective on time changed. You learned how to control your mind. And in particular, you wrote that SEAL just wanted to get better tomorrow, right? That was his perspective. It wasn't like this big overwhelming idea. It was just focusing on getting better tomorrow. Why is it from your perspective? And to me, I see a clear theme, right? Like people who overthink or who make a big plan and then they try to measure up to that plan, get overwhelmed, right? You seem to be much more in the immediate, and it's much easier to kind of persevere through the immediate. Why do you think, from your perspective, that thinking too far ahead and sometimes over planning, overthinking can be detrimental to actual perseverance and pushing through the grit?
I think there's a lot of ways to answer this. I think a lot of people shortchange the journey when they think too far ahead, and they go right to the end and they eliminate the steps. So I'll give you an example. That's just Ultraman. It wasn't a 5-year ahead or big thing, but I had a goal. But I love the workouts. I love the journey. If I was studying for the bar, you have to have a passion for the process, the actual late nights. There has to be an appreciation for that because everything requires that. You didn't just take the bar and pass it. You had to stay up late, study, and it stunk, and you sacrificed and all that. Guess what? That's the same with every single big goal that you have. There's no way to get around that. And I love the process. So the relationship, people think of relationships in terms of people. How's your relationship, Fred, with your son or your parents or whatever? But they rarely think about their relationship with money, really understand their relationship with money. Why am I working? What do I want to do with it? What do I use my money for? And the time.
Yeah, what are the sacrifices, right? What are the time sacrifices, the health sacrifices? So many people grinding for that money. Sometimes I think they're unaware of all the sacrifices they're making along that sort of chase.
Or they think they have forever to do it. I'll do Ultraman next year. I'll take the bar next year. I'm sure everybody listening to this knows they're going to die. There's no one listening to this podcast that doesn't think that. but I guarantee you that 99.9%, maybe yourself included, don't have their graveyard plot picked out. They haven't given their passcodes to their significant other. Here's the key to my security box. If something were to, God forbid, happen to me. Here's my Instagram path. Like, they haven't done that. The reason is they know they're going to die, but they don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. Because if you knew definitively you had a week to live, you would have all that mapped out, right? So we don't think it's even possible that something could happen to us. We don't think we could get in a car accident or we could wake up with a diagnosis. We're bulletproof.
Yeah.
Because that happens to other people. Until you realize that any day, my relationship with time is, I believe, so unique. I'm so aware of my mortality. I'm so aware of every single day. I talk about it. I think about it. Talk to my wife about it. I always say to my wife, like, how both of our parents, I would not true anymore, but I used to say all the time, both of our parents are alive. Our kids are healthy, knock on wood. Like, your job, your role, how could life even get better? And like, I'm always bringing her to what it is. And I'm aware that it can all change. And it did change for me, as it will for almost everybody. I'm sure the people that got diagnosed with cancer didn't think, most often they were surprised. I got this thing, I'm going to get it checked out. Oh my God.
You never think it's going to happen to you. Like, it's the classic, right? Like, or it'll happen like one day that's so distant that I don't really have to kind of think about how I'm living my life right now. It's the memento mori thing, right? Like, remember that you are mortal. Like, we usually don't live with that consciousness.
If you're not thinking that, I operate with, I'm almost manic. I operate with the most insane urgency. Everything is ready, fire, aim. I hear about Ultraman, I sign up for it. I don't know where it is. I don't know how cold the water is. I don't know. I'm in. And then I'm going to figure it out. Marquee jet. Great idea. I mean, there's a little bit of research behind it, obviously, but I don't have it all figured out. I don't have the time to wait to figure it out. If I have the enthusiasm, if I can see it in my mind's eye, if I can see it, like, I could do this, and my heart, if my intuition is telling me that I can make this happen, again, with no airplanes, not knowing anything, but I could see a path, and I see what it looks like. I go for it.
It's a very inspiring approach you have. I have to say, like, I went more like the sort of the school path and like the planning everything out and planning everything like 20 years in advance. Right? And it took me a long time to sort of reconnect with my intuition, with my desires. Right? And when I read your book, you wrote something about how, an experience is like a deposit in a bank account. It's something you can draw on. And it's so true. When you've had these amazing experiences, anybody that's had great experiences in their life, something you can go back to with your memories, something that feeds you for your entire life. And you wrote this line, you wrote, if you climb Mount Washington with someone, like, you'll have an experience with them, like, you'll have lifelong memories. And I have to confess, when I read that line, it struck a chord. I started sending out some texts. I'm like, guys, we're climbing Mount Washington next year. A few people think I'm crazy, but we're doing it. We are doing it next year. It was inspired by a line in Living with the Monks. So I had to give you credit for that. That's going to happen.
Fred, when I shot Living with the Seal, so Living with the Seal was my first book. I went to 14 publishers, and I wasn't on Instagram. Maybe I had like 200, 700, something like 2,000, 700, something like that, like nothing followers. And most of them like fraternity brothers, my family, my coworkers. 14 publishers rejected it. I didn't even get a meeting. I didn't even get a face-to-face meeting with any of the publishers. All right. And then I knocked on the door of a small independent publisher called Center Street, which is a division of a bigger publisher called Hachette. And the editor, Kate Hartzing, gave me a shot. Okay. She gave me a shot. And the book became, a huge hit. New York Times bestseller, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And the reason why I'm sharing this story is it is the exact example of my journey. 14 people said no, and I kept going until I found the one yes. The only thing I'm good at It's like the only thing I'm good at is not the only thing, but is not quitting until I find a path to success. That's it. I could have easily been like, oh, and the book would have never came out. But I was going to exhaust every possible option. I would exhaust every possible option, from smaller publisher to smaller publisher to smaller publisher to self-publishing it. And ultimately, I would have found the way to put that book out, even if she said no. And that's not a superpower, man. That is just an unwavering commitment to not negotiate your goal. And I have an unwavering commitment to that. And it doesn't always work. But I've always found that there's only two outcomes: success, or you've exhausted every possible option and it didn't work. And either one of those is okay. It's okay to fail, but not to quit. Not to quit. And there's a big difference between failing and quitting. Quitting is like, this sucks. I don't have what it takes. I'm not, I don't want to go through this. I quit. I tap out. I'm done. Failing is, it didn't work for me. I tried everything and my product wasn't right, or the timing. It just didn't work. And that's okay too.
You can still have that self-respect, knowing that you've exhausted all of your reasonable paths. You've done all the things. You've learned maybe probably some lessons along the way, but it wasn't out of discouragement for the fact that it was hard.
Or I don't have enough experience, or I'm not good enough, or
those
any
excuses.
Of the other self-doubt that people use to fuel a story to the public, ultimately, of why it didn't work.
Right. I love it. And this is like such a great mindset for anybody trying to achieve anything in life. And obviously your track record speaks for itself. But then with living with the monks, you go through a different journey, a completely different journey. And first of all, it's also a hilarious book, laugh out loud moments. First of all, like the moment where you realize that it's Christian monks. Because it's true, we talk about monks, we think it's going to be Buddhist monks. So like that sort of surprise. And then, your driver getting there and says, oh my God, this is the boonies. Your driver's like, this isn't the boonies, this is the loonies, right? So it's like really, really hilarious. And you write that you were looking for that feeling of accomplishment that you get from business, but you were looking for it permanently. So it was more like an inner quest, like a spiritual quest, than an external quest of achievement. It's clear that like all the stillness and the calm was kind of irritating you, if not driving you crazy at times. And you had this really interesting thought that kept coming back in the book. The thought that one of the things you realized living with the monks is how modern life kind of constantly bombards us with information and overwhelms us. And we're so constantly overwhelmed by everything: social media, kids, calendars, business appointments, workouts, all of the different things, that in this mad scramble, it's the first time I read it expressed quite that way, that we've lost our most significant asset, you write, the ability to think for ourselves. And you write that this mad scramble of modernity, one of the effects it has is you can start losing touch with your own intuition, your own gut feeling, which is really one of your secret weapons. Obviously, in your life, you're beyond busy. Your life appears, at least from a distance, to operate at warp speed sometimes. How do you deal with this challenge, this sort of information overload challenge on a day-to-day basis, to make sure that you don't lose touch with your intuition, your gut feelings, your authentic sort of connection with yourself?
Yeah, and again, I'm not a scientist, or a therapist, but I do believe, I stand by that are one of the only ways to stay in touch with our greatest power, which is our intuition, especially when we're getting bombarded with social media, news, and this, and influence, and podcasts, and all this stuff, is to spend time alone. And it doesn't mean you have to go to the Himalayan mountains, lay on a couch, and sit, and think for an hour, and hours at a time. But it's important to spend alone time. You sharpen that muscle by spending time alone. Intuitively, I've been doing that by running. That's my time to think, block everything out. I didn't even realize it. But it's important to spend time alone and to do some thinking. If you look at a lot of the great leaders, great CEOs, I just saw on the Bill Gates special, that he goes on think retreats. My wife created a fake commute. Work is 2 miles away, but she turned it into a 40-minute commute so she can think in the morning.
That's cool.
It's important to to spend a little time and not ask Siri and not Google things and think about what it means to you, you know, and get in touch with your intuition. So you said something earlier when you were introducing the monk story, though, about feeling accomplished. And I'm just going to take a quick sidebar to piggyback off that. When my wife sold Spanx recently, I asked her, like, it was a big transaction. You know about transactions.
Yeah.
It was a big transaction. And she was like, I asked her, is there anything you want to do to celebrate this? Like, you want to buy, what do you want to buy a yacht? Like, what do you want to do? And she didn't. And she just said 3 words to me. She said, I did it. I did it. She had this feeling of accomplishment. She didn't need a yacht she didn't do it for the yacht. She didn't do it she did it for the sense of accomplishment. And I can tell you from experience, I sold 5 companies so I have the right to say this. The feeling you get when you sell a company, maybe Sarah's was different because her transaction was bigger than, all 5 of mine combined. The same feeling you get when they send the wire to your bank account because you sold the company or they give you the check. It's the same feeling you get, feeling, when you cross the finish line of a marathon, or you help an old lady across the street, or you do something that makes you feel accomplished and good. It's the same exact feeling. And many of us, we spend our whole life trying to figure out that one Spanx moment when we sell the company, or that one big whatever, and we wait to get that. But the reality is, if you could figure out how to bottle those feelings every day, you really won life, because those transactions are once every 2 decades, in your life.
I mean, the vast majority of people, it'll never happen, right? Realistically.
The person, helping someone, volunteering, doing something that makes you feel. It's what we all have in common. We want to feel good. We want to feel accomplished. If you can figure out how to do that every day, you don't need to climb Mount Everest to do that. If you can figure out how to get that in your life every day, you really have won. To me, that is the secret. It's not, that is the number one secret, because it's a feeling. And that struck me when she said that, when I put it into wow, I felt that. I know what you mean, but I get that feeling all the time, sweetie. She's like, what are you talking about? And I really do, on a day-to-day basis. I really do. Now, I have a coaching program, so I get, my ROI, my return on investment isn't the financial element of it. It's the DMs that I get saying, wow, you really impacted me today, man. I went to visit my mom. I would have never have done that if you didn't tell me more about time and this and that. Even you as a transaction, as a lawyer, as and all the things that you do as a podcast host or whatever, the return on the ROI should not only be financial. It should be about the viewers and listeners that watch this, that benefit. It should be about, the people, your clients that you help on the legal side, or you're still practicing law, right, Fred?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, right. So, I just want to make sure you didn't retire on me or anything yesterday.
No. I'm still in the game.
But the ROI should be more than just settlements and transactions. The ROI should be how you influence your clients, how you interact with them. If they feel like they made a good decision on the lawyer that they chose, that they feel like they put their commitments and family matters in the hands of someone they can trust. These are the things that people get overshadowed by the dollars and cents. I've never built my career on that, man.
No, it's so true what you're saying. I remember when I was younger, working in bigger firms, and I was working in complex transactions, working with bigger companies and so forth. And you get a lot of satisfaction from that. But then I decided to try out sort of practicing on my own more independently. And the biggest difference I felt initially had nothing to do with financial, right? People thought I was being an entrepreneur or whatever. Had nothing to do with that. The biggest difference was I could feel the positive impact I'm having on an entrepreneur's life, helping a human being, helping this person, making a difference in their lives, in their business, in their family lives, and so forth. That was really, I felt wow, what a source of energy I'm getting just from being closer to the client, helping actual human beings. That's such an amazing source of energy.
If you don't have, again, we're having a conversation with friends. So I haven't thought about this stuff,
Yeah.
but off the top of my head, if you don't have that feeling as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, you're probably in the wrong space, because they say you find your purpose at the intersection of three things. What it is you love to do, what it is you love to do, providing a product or service that can help people, and getting good at it. If you can do those three things, you really found your purpose. If you don't feel like you're helping people through, and I always did, even at Marquis Jet, I'm making your travel easier. I'm going to be the best customer service advocate and rep I can for you. I'm never going to not take a call. I'm going to get in front of my problems. Like all of that stuff. I really felt like I was providing a service first, rather than just a transaction.
Right. It's very clear that energy of purpose is very present in your life, like making an impact on people's lives, helping people, making sure that you can have that impact. It's very, very clear. And it's so funny because like over the course of my own journey, I sort of became more and more obsessed with this concept of purpose. And I know you've written about, Viktor Frankl writes about, once you've found a purpose, once you've found something where you want to help people, you want to be part of something greater than you are, you create really strong imagery around it. I love the fact that you took that aspect of Viktor Frankl's work, because again, it's really practical, really tactile, right? Like create imagery around that, and then you kind of stay connected to it. And it really energizes you. That's the thing. It's not like Halo stuff. It's not like you're trying to prove that you're a good person. It really does provide you with an unbelievable amount of energy that I believe once you hit certain financial milestones, you just don't get that same energy like going for more money, right?
No, I agree. Yeah, I agree.
It's amazing. It's amazing. So you've got these really cool little hacks that kind of like work as like almost like, and I took just a couple of them, like 2 or 3 word expressions that kind of like bring you, like focus you on a kind of key concept that can help you perform. One of them is dodging arrows, right? You talk about, and we talked a little bit about like dodging the distraction arrows, about how, once you reach a certain level of activity in your life, might be after your 20s, maybe into your 30s, you've reached that level of energy. Now it's no longer just about adding stuff. It's also about what are you going to remove, right? To have that focus, you need to eliminate certain things in your life, right? So do you have a process where you kind of take a look at your life, think, okay, what can I eliminate? What do I want to focus on? Do you build that? Do you schedule that into your actual day-to-day?
Not so much that I schedule it into my day-to-day, but I'm aware of it. So if I just took on a project, all-day running company, I know that to take that on, I have to eliminate some of the other stuff that was on that I was looking at. I had to make a decision. I can't do everything. But the arrows that I talk about mostly are stuff that come at you without even knowing every day. And it could just be like, I need 15 minutes of your time. Or my son has to, it's constant. It's constant. Like today, I have to do something. My son his bracelets fell off to the orthodontist. Like you're just always getting. So the one thing that I do to kind of get in front of that is I'm a big believer in morning routines. I like to get early morning wins, but I'm a much bigger believer in evening routines. So I like to set my calendar for the day the night before. I don't think anybody here listening is good enough to just wake up and wing it. What am I going to do today? Oh, let's map out the day. Like, no, the best CEOs in the world, they have 3 assistants. They give them a schedule, and they say 9 o'clock you're here, 11 here, 12 I'm whisking you to here, 1. They follow the script. We don't have 3 assistants, so you got to map it out the night before. Most important stuff first, and then you go and you try to execute on it. You just follow the script, so you can avoid a lot of arrows when you're playing offense. Most of us, I believe, play life on defense. Our calendars fill up with other people's requests for our time at Zoom meetings, weddings, and we're just yes. And then all of a sudden, our 52 weekends, and they're all filled, and we have no time for ourselves. And I flipped that model upside down. I play life. Let me show you this, Fred. Check this out. Are we on video or just audio?
A video too.
Oh, check this out.
Yeah, sure.
This is my entire year. This is a calendar.
Oh man, I love that.
This is my entire year. You can see all these different things laid out.
That is so cool.
This is a thing called the big ass calendar that I had. And but I lay out my whole year in advance. in advance. Ultraman, these things, they're planned. And I follow the script. So when the arrows come at me, I get thrown off track. But the most important thing, I try to get on my calendar and play offense so I don't fill up my calendars with other people's requests for time. And that, guess what? My 2022 was unbelievable. It was baked in December 2021. I've just been executing on it.
You've just been executing. So you're not dealing with all that overwhelm and all the different, like, you know what you want to achieve. You know the goals that you've selected. It's so funny because as a sports fan, the first time when we were talking about dodging arrows, I'm thinking like, oh, that's great. You're actually playing defense. But it's interesting how you frame that as playing offense, right? If you want to achieve the goals that you're going to achieve, you're not going to achieve them by getting hit by all the arrows, right? So it's actually part of playing offense.
Sit around waiting, man. And then, you lose control of your time.
It's great. And another one that I love is remember tomorrow. I love that. Just a little weird 2-word statement, right? And it's like whenever you get to a key decision, remember how it's going to make you feel tomorrow, right? Like always do it with an investment mindset of like, what's the impact going to be tomorrow? What's the impact going to be at the end of the year? And you kind of go back to that, I'm sure. It's just a nice way to kind of phrase that.
Yeah, I mean, that in a nutshell is think about how your decision today will impact you tomorrow. So if you want to drop out of the marathon at mile 18, that's cool. But how will you feel tomorrow when you have to wake up and be like, I could have gutted it out? You don't want to return all your calls, your clients, this and that, prospects that call. You don't want to go, that's fine. But how will you feel tomorrow if someone else does it and gets the account? So I always like to ask myself that question, like, how will this decision, big or small, impact me tomorrow?
Yeah, the impact on the future. And part of that is also your investment mindset of like, the 18 minutes a day. Like you do something 7 minutes a day, 8 minutes a day. It's like, think about the compound interest of that practice over time. And a really great little hack that you shared on your Instagram, which is really filled with all kinds of super useful stuff that I really love. This idea of like, think of like, I forget what you said, like 10 or 20 or however, whatever the number is, the people that can make the biggest impact in your life or in your business. And like once a quarter, just make sure that you're kind of present in their life. And you just plant those little seeds. And it doesn't take a lot of time, but you're not focusing on like one thing they can do for you. It's not transactional. It's more like you're planting seeds and you keep planting the seeds. Some of them eventually are gonna grow.
I was on my way to pick up my son yesterday at school. He goes to school at like 40-minute drive in traffic yesterday. And the first thing that came into my head is, who are the people that I should call during these 40 minutes? Like, instead of listening to the radio, let me just go knock out 3 or 4 seeds. Let me plant a couple of seeds. Let me hit a couple of people up and just check in. And that, and I do that. It's second nature to me. But listen, here's the thing. If you just do that 3 people a day, right? Take a minute.
Yeah.
And next up, hey, Fred, man, thanks for the pod today. Great to meet you. Awesome chat, man. Appreciate you. Boom, sent. 3 of those a day in a year, that's 1,000. 3 minutes a day equals 1,000 people. Now, they're not all going to be customers or clients or best friends, but what I said earlier, you need one idea, one this, one referral, one anything. So I like the odds. If you go to 1,000 people, that one of them is going to react or respond there when you need them. And I've been doing
It's huge when you adopt that longer term perspective and investing in the future. One little habit like this, right? The 1 minute a day can literally have a transformative. And then like when you do that for 3 years, that's 3,000, right? So it's like, it keeps adding up.
Yeah. Or for, in my case, 30 years. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I call it the 3-minute miracle. You just spend 3 minutes a day. You send a text, handwritten letter, DM, and the floodgates will open.
Awesome.
I've never, Fred, I was saying one thing. I've never seen anybody that's invested a couple of minutes a day consistently. You can't do it for a week, but consistently, even a call a day, that's backfired. I've just never. And all those transactions, they're one way. I'm not asking, hey, Fred, I need a favor. I never do that. I don't ask for favors unless it's like medical or like really important.
Yeah.
So it's all one way, man. Fred, I know you're into the Raptors. Check out this article on the Raptors. I'm giving stuff. I'm not asking for stuff.
Yeah, and I love it. And it's like, remember tomorrow and like, remember next year, remember 2 years from now, right? So keep planting those seeds, keep going forward with that investor's mindset. It's just a great way to look at it. So for all the amazing things you've achieved, in some quarters, you're still known, and you refer to yourself even as Mr. Sarah Blakely, right? You spoke about the amazing transaction. You had some funny story of women noticing you at a restaurant and then coming up to you, and you think it's kind of, and it's like, yeah, are you Sarah Blakely's husband, right? That's what you're kind of known as. And a lot of men feel insecure being with a successful woman. You hear this a lot when you talk to successful women. They're like, it's a struggle because we just make men feel insecure. And in today's society, like men are supposed to be providers and protectors. So very few men will ever have a woman that's as successful as yours has been. What advice or perspective can you share with men in this regard? How can they celebrate the power and beauty of powerful women and not be made to feel insecure or judged by how the culture sees them?
I don't know if I have the secret formula for that, Fred, but for me, when the red light is on for Sarah, I'm her biggest fan and cheerleader, and vice versa. And I just feel like I went through a period of insecurity, like where I remember going into pre-Sarah, when I sold my first company, into meetings with the board and this and that, feeling like I'm definitely the least intelligent person in the room, the least qualified person. I've gone through that. I know what that feels like. But now when I look at my life and accomplishments, and I'm not talking about financial, just in multiple buckets, I just don't feel that way. So I don't know. I've never felt that way. I'm super proud of her. And I love when people come over to her. I love it. So it's a partnership, man. And she never made me feel like that. You know what I mean? Like, she's so regular. She's like, and Spank's a small part of her success. You said very few people will be as successful with her, maybe financially. But success is multiple buckets. So,
right. It's the life resume approach, which I love. It's one of the things I really love about your work. It's the focus not just on building a work resume, not just the focus on building a career resume, but building a life resume, building those life experiences, and not just focusing on one of the buckets. And you talk about, some people have a bucket list. You also have a fuck it list, like something you're just going to do just because, right? Just because you feel like it, just because you want it. It's going to bring energy in your life. So talk a little bit about that. Like, first of all, like, how did sort of you approach this idea? And I know you help other people do that, of building a life resume, thinking of your life as experiences. And then I'd like to know what's a big thing coming up for you in your life resume or your fuck it list building up into the future?
Well, I just think the more you experience, the more you have to offer. I feel like there's a huge wave of influencers about talking about how you have to grind and push and work so hard or whatever. I'm like, no shit. Did you go to Harvard to tell everybody that? Guess what, everybody listening, you got to work hard. Like that's obvious. But what's lost in that message is the importance of not giving up your 20s, of not giving up. They interviewed the wealthiest families in America. There was a study where they, liquid net worth of like 20, 25 million liquid or more, very wealthy families. And they asked them what their biggest regret was in getting all their money. And overwhelmingly, it was giving up what they had for what they wanted. They gave up what they already had to get what they want. And, again, you couldn't, it's easy for me to say now, but like, I have friends on a very, very modest salary that would say the same thing. You couldn't pay them enough to miss a season of Little League. So you can't lose track of that. And your life resume is as important as your work resume. It's the things you've done, how you show up, your adventures, your races, your art, whatever it is that you do. It's that bucket. And it's what makes you interesting. It might help you land the job. It's what people want to talk about at lunch. It's what customers are it's contagious. It's infectious. And so I encourage people every year to do 1 year defining thing. There's an old Japanese ritual called the misogi. And the notion around a misogi is you do one big year-defining thing every year that you can really remember. So if I were to ask you, Fred, like, what'd you do in 2000? You don't have to answer me. 2015, 18. You shouldn't struggle to rattle it off. 2016, I wrote a book. I launched a podcast in 18. I ran a marathon. I learned Chinese. I did whatever. But you should be able. And here's the thing: if you're 45 and listening to this, 45 years old, the average American lives to be 78. So you live another you live to 80. You live another 35 years. Imagine if every year you did some kind of year-defining thing that you normally wouldn't have done. This year for me, it was Ultraman. And you had 35 Ultraman type things on your life resume. Like, that's a friggin' and you did everything else the same. You had your law firm, you did everything else the same.
Yeah.
That's an unbelievable look back when you're 85 and you look back. And I want to be able to rattle that off. And I can. So I every year, I don't know what 2023 will look like, but I just did a race that I'll have forever. And that one day of suffering, man, that one day investment suffering will give me another 35-year return on investment if I live another 35 years. If every single day I can talk about it, no one can take it away from me. I went through one day of suffering. For the rest of my life, I'll have a memory and experience I can talk about.
So true.
And by the way, I could give a whole speech. I could write a book. We could spend 5 hours talking about the benefits, how I did the race, why I did the race, what I learned from the race, what changed, how I benefited from the race, the friends I made from the race. I could go on. I could do a TED Talk on it. Want to know why? Because I did it. Just because I did it. So I really encourage people, while obviously you have to build your business and pay your bills, you also don't neglect the life resume side of your journey.
I love it. It's such a full way of looking at life as a whole, right? As a whole. And then you kind of build up these meaningful memories along the way and these amazing relationships and these stories you can tell. And I also love the more you experience, the more you can give, right? The more you can contribute to others. People will kind of benefit from that experience. And I mean, I find your work super refreshing and inspiring, especially for like those of us who've gone through like the traditional, more like the school system, the regular sort of, career path. And we've always kind of make these great plans and then we try to measure up to the plan. And then we inevitably, we don't hit all of the goals that we have. And kind of like you remind us, always go back to your experience, always go back to like what excites you, what provides you with enthusiasm, what provides you with meaning and purpose, and don't neglect that. And I just feel like it's such an important message today to not lose sight of that, not lose sight of like the bigger battle, right? And sacrifice it for a narrow battle. Yeah.
Get off road a little bit, You have to stay on the highway, on the road, but sometimes it's good to pull over a little bit, man, and just shake it up. It makes the drive on the road less bumpy. You know what I mean?
Right.
I need that in my life. I need a distraction from just the work and the kids. I need something that, for me, that makes me feel accomplished.
Yeah. So I'm staking the ground. I'm claiming the Mount Washington idea for 2023. What's one big idea, one big element on the bucket list or on the life resume that you're kind of dreaming of that might be next for you?
Like I said, I just knocked one off, so I'm not sure what the next thing is going to look like. But I can tell you that it's going to have the same characteristics. What characteristics it will have? It'll have an element, and you have them all in Mount Washington. It will have an element of challenge, like it won't be easy. It'll have an element of enthusiasm, like I'll be really excited about it. I'll have an element of fear, which I'm sure you'll have when you get to Mount Washington, especially if you do it in the winter. And it'll have a huge return on investment for me as a person. And those are the qualities that I always look for in those kind of challenges.
That's awesome. Jesse, thank you so much. This is super inspiring, super educational, super helpful in a practical way, not just in a sort of theoretical way. I think you've got so much to give to, entrepreneurs, young generation, older generations. Just keep that perspective in mind of that you're building a life, you're building experiences, you're building relationships. I think your message is awesome. Your content is awesome. I want to thank you for being you. Keep doing it. Keep crushing it. You inspire a lot of us. Jesse Itzler, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Fred. Thank you.